Chapter 8 The Names on the Rock. It was good news if you reached Independence Rock by the 4th of July. That's what Mr. Palmer said in his guidebook. With about 800 miles of trail behind you, you'd be sure to make it over the mountains before the big snows came. So there was a lot of cheering and shouting when the Abbott's wagon trail pulled into camp in front of the great granite rock. It was July 3rd, a full day ahead of Mr. Palmer's schedule. The Beard brothers fired their guns into the air. Mr. Harrigan played Yankee Doodle on his fiddle. Ma decided they'd have a special meal to celebrate. It looks like a big stone turtle, Sam said. Mr. Palmer says travelers write their names on the rock. Can we go see? Sure can, Pa. Pa handed Sam a tin cup of gunpowder he'd mixed with bacon grease to make a black paint. And make your own mark as well. I want to do that, Lizzie said, shaking out a blanket and draping it over 2 barrels. Sam turned to Sarah. You should come too and write your name on the rock. Sarah shook her head and started back toward the wagon, but Ma stepped in front of her. She tipped Sarah's chin up and looked her in the eye. You should go. Write your parents' name if you wish, to remember them. Sarah blinked fast and nodded. She started after Sam and Lizzie. Then Amelia came running. I come too. Ma smiled. Do you mind taking her with you? Sam sighed. Come on, Amelia. Let's go see the big rock. Ranger snuffled along behind Amelia, just in case she thought to run off again, but she stayed close, happily holding Sam's hand on one side, Sarah's on the other. In a few minutes, they were standing at the base of Independence Rock. Sam started to scramble up its slope, but Lizzie grabbed his sleeve. Look at them all, she pointed at the rock wall in front of them. It was covered in names, hundreds and hundreds of names. Some were full names with dates, some just first names. They were chiseled into the rock or scratched with nails or written in looping black paint like Sam had brought. The names went on and on. There are so many, Lizzie whispered. Sarah ran her hand over the inscriptions. S. Lean, M. B. Lean. She whispered the names aloud. They were here just a couple of months ago. They ran their hands over the sun-warmed rock, calling out the names until Sarah gasped and jerked her hand away. What happened? Are you okay? At first, Sam was worried a snake had bitten her. Rattlers were common out here. But Sarah didn't look hurt. She looked happy for the first time in weeks. My uncle! She pointed to a name on the wall. Sam and Lizzie leaned in close too. It was carefully written in tar, weathered some by rain and sun and wind, but as clear as could be. Aaron Robert Clark. Sarah pressed her hand flat against the name as if she could reach through the stone to hold his hand. He's waiting for us in Salt Lake City. Uncle Aaron and Aunt Helen and Eliza and Martha and Abram and Mercy. They're all waiting for us to come, she whispered, and her eyes filled with tears. Well, just waiting for me now, I guess. But she smiled, and Sam thought he understood why. It must have felt good to remember she still had family. Sarah wiped her wet cheeks with her hand, and Ranger licked the salty tears from her fingers. You want to write your name next to your uncle's? Sam held up the powder and bacon grease mixture. Sarah nodded and dipped her finger into the gritty paint. Carefully beside her uncle's name, she wrote her own, Sarah Margaret Fuson, July 3, 1850. Then she dipped her finger in the paint and lifted it to the rock again. Sarah paused and looked up at Lizzie. How do you spell remembrance? Lizzie spelled it out, and Sarah carefully marked the letters in the paint on the rock. In remembrance, Rebecca Ann Ferguson and Charles Joseph Ferguson. Will you write yours close to mine? Sarah asked Sam and Lizzie. She took the cup while Sam and Lizzie wrote their names on the rough surface. Lizzie added Amelia's name too. You want to make your mark on the rock, dog? Sam grinned and knelt down. He lifted Ranger's paw, smeared it with homemade paint, and pressed it against the wall. There! Now there's a record of your journey, too. Ranger sniffed his paw. The bacon grease made him hungry, but he wasn't sure what to make of the black powder mixed with it. It smelled smoky and dangerous, not good to eat. Let's climb to the top of the rock, Sam said, racing up the steep slope. Sam, wait, Lizzie called. We can't take Amelia way up there, and we should get back to camp anyway. Oh, all right, Sam came down and followed Lizzie and Sarah, who each held one of Amelia's hands on the way to the wagons. He leaned down and whispered to Ranger, You and I will have to come back on our own to explore.